Hello and welcome to Folsom Field. Matt Smith here as always. Thanks so much for watching the channel. Make sure you like and subscribe before we get going. Helps me out a ton and I really appreciate it. 49-24 Colorado over Utah today. How about a 4-game winning streak for the Buffs? The first of its kind under Coach Prime. And Colorado advances to 8-2 and 6-1 in conference. Still right there at the top of the Big 12 with BYU, who plays Kansas a little bit later tonight. Very impressive performance from Colorado and a dominant victory despite not having their best stuff. And that's consecutive weeks in which I would say they really haven't had their A game, but they still scored over 40 points, 90 in total the last 2 weeks combined. A little bit of a slow start once again for this Colorado team offensively, right? Shedeur with an interception on the very first play of the game. If he hits Travis, might even be a house call, at least like a 40-yard pickup, but kind of threw it right to the linebacker there. Not indicative of who he was. I would say this game in general, he definitely wasn't his best, and I think a lot of that had to do with the #1 defense in the Big 12 coming into today. And even after the game, he gave Kyle Whittingham and that defensive staff a lot of credit for the different looks they were kind of throwing at him. They were playing chess with him at the line of scrimmage, a lot of faking that they were going to blitz and pulling back out, and that's all on him to sort through everything. It took him a little bit longer, I thought, today to kind of make his way through some of what they were throwing at him. But in the second half, he started to settle down. And again, finishes 30 of 41, 340, 3 touchdowns. Almost had a receiving touchdown. We'll get there a little bit later. Did have the interception and then a bad fumble in the first half. The first half of this one ended 21-9, but it felt like Colorado probably should have been up like 34, 35-9, something like that. It was a performance where right out of the jump, you knew that Utah's offense that came in, they're on their, third string quarterback now, Zach Wilson's little brother Isaac. That first half from Isaac was really rough. Colorado was all over him. It was just their offense that really prohibited them from truly separating in the first half and making, a 49-24 score look closer than what it probably should have been. Colorado probably should have 60-burgered Utah today. However, again, this is a Utah team that has had the Buffs' numbers. You've had Kyle Whittingham that's typically thrown a really physical, really aggressive defense at Colorado, and that's one thing that the Buffs hadn't really done all that well for the better part of the last decade, is match other teams who tend to out-physical their opponents with physicality. Well, Colorado dominated Utah. The battle of physicality at the line of scrimmage, I felt like tonight. It was their offense that struggled to get going, but their defense just continues to stack impressive performances. And we spoke about this a little bit earlier this week on the channel, but Colorado, this team, has formed an identity. And it's defense first. Robert Livingston, the entire defensive staff, Vincent Dancy, Coach Sapp, right? Coach Lewis, Coach Hart, Coach Mathis, Coach Elo, and all the support staff, they've done an excellent job. And it's been a total 180, that defensive unit from last year to this year. And again, I thought that, they did a really good job just making that Utah offense uncomfortable. And yet again, wow, that's wonderful. I came up here because I was like, hey, it won't have the tractor down there, but the wind and all the cans. So, just can't win sometimes, I guess. The point is that this defense has done a really good job, I would say, over the middle to latter half of this season so far, at kind of using that old Bill Belichick idiom, right? You want to make your opponent play left-handed. You want to take away what they do well. And what does Utah do well? Well, they rush the football. And today, Bernard finishes 11 carries for 23 yards. Somebody on social media put out there earlier, well, Utah runs the ball real well. I said, yeah, but Colorado's rush defense, they don't get enough credit for how good they actually have been. And today was stellar. Bernard's a hell of a back. That's got to be his worst career day, or one of them. They held him to 1.8 average on the ground. That is incredibly impressive. And when we think back to last year, the 2 priorities Coach Prime had, run the ball, stop the run. And through the entire length of the season, yeah, some guys have hit their numbers for sure, but they haven't been just devastated. Maybe outside of that Kansas State game where you thought, hey, look, you got to find a way to wrap up. Ever since they missed all those tackles in that game, they've really shored that part of it up. Really haven't missed a ton of tackles. Today didn't miss practically any. They were wrapping up really well. The crowd was fantastic. Big noon is here, and, it's early, right? Maybe you have a late arriving crowd. Nope. Everybody was in their seat for kickoff and stayed all the way through, the final horn in this one. And you feel the buy-in and the energy and the buzz in this building. It's very real for an 8-2 team. And again, back-to-back weeks where I felt like they left some meat on the bone. As I said, I felt like they probably should have put up a bigger number, but I want to talk about why they're finding this success. And as I mentioned, the defensive turnaround, they've lopped off, I think it's over 11 points compared to the average allowed to opponents last year. Unbelievable turnaround. It truly is. And here's a big part of it. You've got a veteran-laden, experienced defense by and large with a lot of guys who played a lot of snaps, okay? And that's important. And we spoke to Levante Bentley and the Nikhai Hill-Green after the game, the linebacking core that has really found some traction, and they found a good pair there. Last year, they kept shuffling guys in and out. It was Bentley early, and then, he kind of got benched, and, Mitchell got in there, and then he got, taken out, and then Bentley came back in, and then Trevor got moved. It was just kind of like trying to plug gaps. Well, you're not doing that now. I guess you are plugging gaps in the running game, but as far as at the linebacker position, you're not doing that. Nikhai Hill-Green, just a fantastic game, another interception today. I thought Levante Bentley did a great job getting downhill. You're just not really seeing those two guys allow backs to get to the second level and hit their burst and go with it. And that's so important when you back that up with the fact that their defensive line has improved to such a degree. You have to remember, Shane Coates hasn't played the last several weeks either. And last year, if Shane Coates missed a game, that would be a really, really big problem for this Colorado defense. I swear. I was like, I'll go up there because it'll be way better and you won't hear all the cans. You cannot win. The point is that Nikhai has brought a different level of physicality, I think, to this defense along with some of these other guys. And without Cokes in the lineup, well, that's Anquin Barnes, that's Tawfiq Thomas, right? That's Chidozie Nwankwo. That's a lot of these guys who have stepped up this year and have really made a significant difference, right? Thomas even got his own sack, his first sack, rather, of his Buffs career today as well. I believe Colorado in total finished with 4 sacks, but there were a lot more pressures. Isaac Wilson got hit a ton when he threw today, and they did a really good job, especially in the first half. I thought Wilson settled a little bit in the second half, but they did a great job making this entire Utah offense uncomfortable. And, then you look at the back end, and the reason those guys can have that type of success is because, well, you're covering really well on the back end. No Preston Hodge today. Bit of a surprise to us. Certainly hope he's back next week for a more high-powered passing attack that Kansas boasts against Jalen Daniels. But what does that mean? Colton Hood's got to step up. And this was a Colorado team that, for the most part last year, much the same as their linebacker position, they were struggling to find a good pair, right? They didn't even have a second corner that they could rely on last year. And now they've got 4. And Colton Hood did a great job stepping up in Preston Hodge's absence. Carter Stoutmeyer, I thought, also played really well. He saw a lot of snaps today as well. And, overall, you just have a team that's bought in, and you've got a unit defensively right now that's playing aggressive. They're playing sound. They're playing fundamental. You hear defensive coaches and coaches in general talk about doing your 111th. This is a defense that does their 111th. Everybody does their job. And you don't see too many big breakdowns. Maybe one of the bigger breakdowns you saw was Travis Hunter, who allowed the first touchdown that he's allowed this season on just a straight up deep ball, a little go route, and he just kind of got beat clean, which is obviously not indicative of Travis. That, of course, is after he had an interception, and we talk about Colton Hood. How about the play he made coming right back to the ball late on the moon ball from Isaac Wilson in the first half, knocking it away, and Travis catches it. Then he goes and he hits the Heisman again, kind of throws the ball, 15-yard penalty. But either way, that was a fantastic play from Colton Hood, and, he just continues to grow more and more and more. He's also right now operating as their kick returner. He also had a nice kick return, a long of 38, which was impressive. But I did think that Utah might have changed their strategy a little bit later in the game to say, all right, well, let's see if you can do that again. And they started kicking short of the end zone, I thought. I think it was intentional, and they actually did a pretty good job of getting down and covering those kicks. But either way, the point is that you've got a defense where guys aren't looking around and worried that somebody else isn't going to be in their right spot. They're communicating really well. They're adjusting on the fly. There was a great example, Nikhai Hill-Green's interception, right? I think it was about 4 consecutive crossers, drag action that Utah had hit between the end of the first half and the beginning of the second half. They come out, they get the ball back at a halftime, first drive, they get to a third down, and Isaac Wilson had only been, really been able to find his targets over the middle of the field for the most part of the first half. It was the same thing in that first third down. Hits, I believe it was a tight end right over the middle, and they pick up a nice little chunk. Well, it sets up again the same situation where you're back in third down. I believe it was third down, but instead of keeping with their man-to-man defense, great adjustment by Robert Livingston to go zone. I'll have you all know I tried not to be on the field with the tractors, but you screwed me. All right, you screwed me with your ideas and your suggestions. Anyway, so again, you've got a defense that's playing sound. They're adjusting well on the fly, and I think they're doing a few things that, again, they didn't do earlier in the year, right? They're bouncing back quicker. They're wrapping up better. They're just continually improving. And the one thing I asked Shedeur about, I didn't really ask him about him. He was very self-critical, and we'll get to the offense and some of the issues that they're dealing with. But the key to the turnaround here really is how sound their defense has been all year. They've done a great job in the red zone, holding teams to field goals by and large. And look, it's been the catalyst, in my opinion, in the overall turnaround, which is pretty impressive when you're talking about an offense with the best quarterback in the country and the best non-quarterback in the country in Travis Hunter. So it's been a very, very welcome sign to see that they just keep stacking them. The consistency's there. The leadership's there at every single position. The depth is there. We talk about Preston Hodge being out. Shane Cokes is out as well, right? They don't miss a beat, and that's something that was not there last year. Significant improvement, and a lot of credit has to go to this entire staff, recruiting and coaching, for bringing those guys in the offseason and addressing some of those weaknesses, and they have so far. And, a really big day overall. I think in total, they have 3 interceptions and a fumble recovery. Utah fumbled 4 times. So, look, I mean, you win the turnover battle, and yet again, this is a defense that imposed their will on a team that didn't really have any business offensively hanging with them. They started to pick up a little traction at the end, and they definitely got to go back and figure out why Utah was able to move the ball more effectively in the second half. Coach Prime said, how many times are we going to let the tight end get open in the slot? You got to be able to stop that and adjust to it at some point. So clearly some things still to work on, and 24 is more than they probably should have scored in this game. But at the same time, I mean, they're not all going to be perfect. They're not all going to be a storybook. They're not all going to be a movie. You've got to get the job done. And look, we talk about, hey, sometimes you're not winning pretty. I would say that offensively. Defensively, despite allowing a few more than you probably should have, it was a pretty solid performance. You definitely have to clean a few things up. Now, offensively is where they're struggling to a degree. Okay, it's wild to talk about a team having scored 90 points over the last 2 weeks combined. And over the last 2 weeks combined, remember how stunned I was at the third down stat last week? Well, I had my eyes like a hawk all over it all game long. 3 of 11 on third down. So in total, the last 2 weeks, 5 of 24. They're not extending drives, yet they're still scoring points. Defensively has a lot to do with that, and quick strike, big playability clearly is the other part of that. But it's a concern for me. It is that you're 5 of 24 in the last 2 games on third down. You will play better teams who can compete with you. And I felt like today, if Utah had a better quarterback in the first half, this is probably a completely different game the way it sets up. So again, and part of that is on the offense, because they just weren't really able to continue sustaining drives. They had 21 in the first half. That should have easily at least been 28, if not, again, into the 30s at halftime. So this is something that I think has to do with several different issues. The last 2 weeks, they have not run the ball well. They really haven't. Isaiah Gustav today was their leading rusher, 7 carries, 59 yards, and of course, he finally broke one. Isaiah finally broke one and hit that 37-yard touchdown, but they've got to be better at that and do it more consistently. Furthermore, in their running game, I don't get it with Dallin Hayden. I know they've got very few options there. He has been very underwhelming to me. Limited opportunities for Colorado. Again, I mean, you've got, 12 carries to backs. You win 49-24, so we're not going to rip that too much, but that's got to get better. This is not a trend that can keep progressing in this direction. It's not good, because it's reverting back to maybe what we saw a little bit earlier in the year and a little bit last year. Got to stay committed to the ground game. It's an attitude, it's a presence, and a lot of that has to do with the offensive line. I felt like there were a couple times, especially early in the first half, just really struggled to get to the second level. But again, I thought Isaiah Gustav, given limited opportunities, 8.4 per carry, you'd like to see maybe a few more touches go his way there. I do know he was dealing with a little finger thing maybe a couple of weeks ago, so maybe that's affected trusted him a little bit. It feels like they haven't given him the leash that they gave him when he had the 22 carries against Cincinnati and, what was it, 90 some odd yards. Again, Shedeur didn't run all that much today outside of the, 3 times he was sacked, which maybe a couple of those were on him, but Utah's defensive line, they got some dudes now. I mean, now they gave up 49 today, but the reason they almost beat BYU last week was because of what they can do getting after the quarterback. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but the one thing that Kyle Whittingham does really well is he'll play chess with the quarterback. And you can tell the level of respect that he has for Shedeur by the degree that they were trying to throw different things at him. You could tell Shedeur normally back up to the line. There's not too much hesitation there, but he was scanning because they were constantly playing with him, showing this guy and then backing off, showing this guy and then backing off. It was all about figuring out where your pressure was coming from. And early in the game, I felt like they struggled with that, but it wasn't all Shedeur. Tight ends, I felt like didn't block their best tonight. That's got to be better because we know how important it is to be in 11 personnel for Colorado. And wide receivers the same. Terrell Timmons finally returning from an injury. He also got hurt in that Baylor game that Omarion Miller got hurt in, and he finally made his way back. Not his best performance. He missed a couple of blocks on screens that got blown up in the backfield. I believe he had a drop as well. Expect him to be better because we've seen some good things out of him in practice and certainly earlier in training camp. So, now that he's healthy, hopefully he can build a little bit of rhythm because without Omarion Miller, they're going to need a guy like that the rest of the season. But fret not because that is the deepest room on the team, that receiver room, and you had other guys step up today. Draylon Miller, first 100-yard game of his career. Could have had 2 touchdowns, 2 huge completions in the second half. His best play as a Buff so far, that big touchdown in the second half where he shook off, was it 1-2 guys and just would not be denied. I thought that specific play was Shedeur's best throw too. Dart over the linebacker, in stride, where only Draylon could catch it. And again, Shedeur started to, I feel like in the second half, started to clean it up a little bit and get a little bit sharper as he figured out a little bit more of what Utah was doing. But again, I felt like just the execution on the whole wasn't where it needed to be, and they still scored 49 points. And that was what Coach Prime talked about when he came in for the press conference. He's like, hey, look, I mean, the fact that, we score 49, but we feel like we left a lot out there, it just tells you about who this team is and how much room they have left to grow. It's something that I talked about this week. We haven't seen this team put it together for 4 quarters. Not yet. Not all phases, all 3 phases. Special teams was cleaned up today a little bit. You didn't have too many big explosives. What was it? Snowden, I think he had a 32-yard kick return, but outside of that, they did a really good job. They limited Dorian Singer on the punt returns as well. 17 was his long. What did he even have receiving? 5 catches, 65, and a touchdown. Yeah, felt a little inconsequential from Singer, but all things told, I was really impressed with what Colorado was able to do despite not having their best in the passing attack. What you saw early was them looking to go downfield and throw the ball a ton. You saw Shedeur holding it. It was a combo of Shedeur holding it and some really long route concepts. Specifically, like there's a great example. You go back, you watch the film, 4th and 8, that unbelievable catch, that ridiculous catch that Travis made at the end of the first half. I mean, just in the middle of 2 guys, gets sandwiched. And what do you want to say about Travis? Obviously, I'll touch on him a little bit in just a second. But that play specifically, it's 4th and 8. You're in no man's land because you don't have a kicker that you feel comfortable with really from that range. And so what do? Well, you go for it, which was the right decision there, in my opinion. I had no problem with the decision to go for it. However, the play call, Shedeur had no options. That ball to Travis, if that's not Travis, that's probably not completed. I mean, he was looking. There was nobody like within 15 yards of the line of scrimmage. I think there was one running back, but he wasn't even remotely close, and he had a man right on him. So the point here is that they got to do a little bit better of a job making sure that they're not constantly stacking plays, passing plays, where your route concepts are breaking 15 to 20 yards. This team against a Utah defense that, albeit they don't do a great job getting pressure from the guys with their hands in the ground, it's more about the blitzes and the exotic looks that they're throwing at you to get, a little disruption in the backfield. But when you've got all that, it's important to get rid of the ball fast. And I felt like there were just a lot of opportunities tonight for Colorado to, at least at the beginning of this game, first half specifically, it got cleaned up a little bit later. it wasn't until that final drive with about 5 minutes left in the second quarter where they finally did what, I spoke about it with Brian on the podcast, and I've talked to you guys about it many, many a time. Get in bunch. Don't be spread to the boundary and let Shedeur operate. Little flip passes, set up the run with the pass. I thought that was when they moved the ball they're most effectively, because I think that's when they're at their best. That's their bread and butter on offense. Now, you got to mix in other stuff. You definitely want to, be testing defenses down the field for sure, but I felt like they were just stuck there a little bit too much. I felt like, again, for three reasons. They didn't run the ball all that effectively. Shedeur held on to it a little bit longer than I'd have liked to see him. There were a couple opportunities, man, just get it out on the slant. You pick up 7 and just keep this thing going. Scalpel, not a hammer. Running the ball was not great, right? I felt like he held on to it a little bit too long, and some of the route concepts down the field just felt like it's a little unrealistic on some of those based upon the time that he's had in the past to expect those to develop deep down the field. However, Will Shepard was a big part of the reason Colorado did have a lot of success early in the first half on offense when they weren't struggling. Obviously with 2 touchdowns, one coming via free play. And then Will did have the fumble at the end of the game, and I'm sure he wants that back. But he's gotten much better as his chemistry with this entire offense and Shedeur kind of picked up. Remember, Will wasn't here in spring ball. He was graduating from Vanderbilt. So I think you're kind of seeing the chemistry come on stronger a little bit later with Shepard than maybe it was early in the year. But he wasn't, at the wide receiver position, in my opinion, the star of the show. I thought it was LaJohntay Wester. LaJohntay has been awesome for Colorado, and that includes, finally, a house call punt return. Huge. It was a huge play. I mean, you go up 14-3 at that stage. This place comes unglued, and the seas parted. It was a great play. Obviously, he showed off his speed there, and he was tabbed a preseason All-American, punt returner by some of these different media organizations. And look, I think we all had pretty high expectations for what he was going to be able to do, but it's been up and down. And, Jimmy Horn has had to come in and take some of those responsibilities off his plate because he hadn't been the best at it. But today he finally broke through. Obviously, Jimmy not playing today. They need him back. We know what Jimmy can do, and they know they need him back as well. He certainly would have helped today. And as I said, Colorado should have 60-burgered Utah with Jimmy Horn in the lineup. That probably happens, I'm guessing. But 11 targets for Wester, 10 catches, 77 yards. Just really good route runner. There's a big third down call where, hey, look, we're not going to get too crazy. It's kind of that old Chiefs play where you motion somebody tight to the line of scrimmage, snap it, and they kind of run that little out. Great first down pickup. And, LaJohntay is just, proven himself weekend in and weekend out that he's somebody you can rely on. Now, we spoke to him this week about wearing the number 1 jersey. You'll notice that he was still in the number 10. He told us that he had some academic stuff he needed to clean up. Sounds like maybe that didn't get buttoned up this week. Maybe we'll see LaJohntay in the 1 next week, but he was really good. Again, Travis, as far as like receiving wise, 8 targets, 5 catches, 55 yards, no receiving touchdowns today. But of course, he did have his first rushing touchdown as a Buff. And pass breakup, interception, and again, some of those catches that he did have, including the one on 4th and 8, was just, what do you want to say? The Heisman's over. As long as he doesn't get hurt the final 2 games and continues to play, he's going to produce because he's Travis, because he's the best player in the country. Coach Prime afterwards was asked about the Heisman. He's like, wasn't that done a couple of weeks ago? It's done now, in my mind. He was an overwhelming favorite heading into the game. I mean, we'll see what Dylan Gabriel and Oregon can do this week, but Genty, that's out, in my opinion. Gabriel, really, Oregon's loaded. It is the Big Ten. He deserves to be in consideration. But everyone around the country can tell who the best player in college football is. And quite frankly, I don't know that it's that close. Travis and then everybody else. And Shedeur is in there as well. And again, even without his A game, he still has another performance that will keep him right in the race. I believe he is just off the single season record for passing yards that he set last year, but I believe today he tied an NCAA record, 46 consecutive games with a touchdown pass. I believe that's the number. Brian Howell had that on social media. Shout out, Brian. Look, that ties an NCAA record. Shedeur doesn't get enough credit for the type of player he is. And the reason in the first half we're going, man, you're better than that, aren't you? Is because of the standard we have. Because as I brought up, this guy's damn near perfect every weekend. and he was real hard on himself, and he had 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. How many quarterbacks have we watched here, prior to his arrival since Steven, not even sniff those numbers? If they sniff those numbers, that would be a career day. Shedeur's up there talking about how he's got to apologize to his teammates, how he's got to take his defense out to dinner this week to make up for his performance. We are so lucky to be able to watch him play. It's going to be a really sad day when it's all over, and it's coming sooner than later, and hopefully not that soon, because this Buffs team is on the right trajectory. They're on the right path. But as impressive as the 49-24 win is, there are things to clean up. You got to get better on third down. 5 of 24 the last 2 weeks. It's a bit of a crisis on third down. Now, obviously, you're not getting to third down. Some drives you're scoring on first and second down. You put up 90 points the last 2 weeks. Okay, you got away with it. I'm sitting up there and I'm watching. I'm going, man, see, like, they can get away with that today. They can get away with that last week to a degree. Coming up, and if you make the Big 12 title, if you make the college football playoff, those are the things you cannot have happen. That's how you get beat. And I felt like we talked about playing mistake-free football. They really weren't able to do that today by and large, and still scored almost 50. So again, this is just a team who is on the precipice of becoming a great team, a really good one, finding different ways. And again today, Travis isn't as dominant. Hey, we're going to do, dominant. Travis isn't as productive outside, not dominant. He was dominant today. Travis isn't as productive outside, so hey, look, we need to get LeJontay involved. We need Will involved. We're going to spread it around. Savell Smalls, again, had another catch, a big one today as well. Fourth down conversions, the Buffs were 2 of 2, important, and in the red zone, perfect again. BJ Green, I thought, had a really nice game as well. Tackle and a half for lost and a half a sack. So did Arden Walker. I thought Okunlola was really good today as well. Tajay McCoy saw some more time this week getting in there at edge. I continue to be so impressed by this Colorado defense. And offensively, they just have to, I called it an identity crisis slightly on social media, because at this point, don't we know that waiting for route combos 30, 40 yards down the field every single play, and maybe this is on Shedeur. So sometimes it is. Some of it is on Shermer, in my opinion. Those two guys got to come together just a little bit more and dial up. Hey, look, I'm not looking for 40 every play here. Like, give me 8, give me 6, give me 5. Scalpel, not a hammer. That's what Shedeur's going to have to do in the NFL. I mean, yeah, sure, you're going to take your shots, but NFL teams are going to sit in too deep on you, and you say, take whatever you want underneath. And unless you become really damn good at it, and Shedeur is like right there. He's like right there. There's part of it where I can see him like wanting to make the big play, but sometimes, even on that first play of the game, LeJontay's open. I know the first read is Travis, but if that's taken sometimes too long to develop, I mean, I think just internally, the offensive line has been better, so the clock isn't as fast as it was last year, but just there are some times where this Colorado offense is too good that you don't need to be sitting and waiting for 40-yarders, and I felt like that was where they struggled. Then at the end of the first half, they got into the bunch, they got in the tights, they're using the space, speed and space, and they did a great job because that's when they're at their best. And they didn't even run the football all that well, and they were still productive with it. So you've got what works really well. Now it's just about cleaning it up and understanding, okay, well, how can I pepper in some of these deep shots among what is working, among what we're good at? All right, do we think we have a lot of that on tape, so they're going to prepare for our strengths? Okay, great. Well, guess what? We got the best quarterback in the country. We have, in my opinion, the best wide receiving core in the country. We shouldn't have to change entirely what we do because we're worried you're going to prepare for us. We've got to do what we do and impose our will. And the problem I felt like today on that specific note, just that tiny little note, is just the fact that they didn't rush the ball all that effectively, right? For the second consecutive week, which puts more pressure on Shedeur. And considering he had like a C+, B- game, in my opinion. Still finishes with 343 touchdowns. You're not going to complain about it. You just know what he's capable of. So altogether, look, Charlie got his first touchdown. That was huge. Charlie Offerdahl comes in at the end of the game and punches it in. Coach Prime talked about how, hey, look, that's been an emphasis. He's been saying that now for a couple of weeks, how they really want to get Offerdahl in the game, get him in the end zone. I asked Charlie after the game, because he spoke to the media, Charlie's seen a lot. Charlie's one of the OBs, one of the original Buffs. Just how it feels having grinded and gone through what they went through to now sitting here at 8-2 and kind of seeing all that hard work and those really tough times get rewarded. And I mean, just lit up, ear to ear smile. He said the Buffs are back. And right now, it would be pretty damn hard to argue against it, okay? There's no real point to doing it. Other things to note, DJ McKinney with his first interception as a Buff there at the end of the game, for all intents and purposes, kind of put it away. And, you know, DJ's been great all year and gets overshadowed by Travis, assuredly. But I will say, I think we all understand how good he is and what kind of a role he's going to play on this team next year. He's your number one next year. There's no doubt about it. I mean, DJ, hey, coming over from Oklahoma State, I've been really impressed. Just an excellent young man, another one of these guys, very high character and clearly a damn good football player as well. Other things to note here, yeah, Cameron Silman-Craig, I thought had a nice game. I feel like it's important to mention him. He kind of goes under the radar. And Shiloh with a big, strip sack at the end of the game that set up Colorado to score once again. And to get Travis Hunter his touchdown today, Shiloh has been playing better. Clearly was affected from that broken forearm and has the last few weeks, I feel like, started to look more and more like himself. And that's great to see because Shiloh's also a great young man. And, I think last year when he went out, we talked about, well, what are they going to do without their emotional leader? It just is a testament to what they've done and what they've built, that his absence when he was out wasn't as glaring. And, coming back in, they haven't had to rely on him too much and could allow him to get back up to speed. And I think that he has played better the last couple of games, certainly. And I'll tell you this, it's nice to have that threat back there as somebody who's going to hit you right in the mouth if he comes and makes a play on you. So that's definitely something that running backs and wide receivers and tight ends, they're thinking about that while he's on the field. There's no doubt about that. All told, I mean, look, this is 8-2 and 6-1. And really, if you beat Kansas State like they should have, they'd be 9-1 and undefeated in conference. They're the best team in the Big 12. They just have to go on the road now again next week to Arrowhead and prove that one more time that they're up for the road test. Now, Kansas got BYU tonight. We'll see what happens in that game. I mean, if Kansas beats BYU, they got something to play for next week. That could be, a ton of fun because that Kansas team is healthier now than they've been in a little while. And I would just say that, again, I brought this up, I think, yesterday on a stream I did, that, at some point during the year, during the end of the season, you probably end up getting tested in a way you don't anticipate. So you just got to make sure you clean things up. And I think as a coach, yeah, you win 49-24, but you have that opportunity to have a ton of teaching tape to go, hey, look, this is what we got to. If you are resting on your laurels after this 49-24, win is kind of his message, then you got it all wrong. I mean, they won 49-24, but to play the caliber of teams that hopefully they will run into in the college football playoff, you got to get better, and they know that as well. And all things told, I mean, the fact that we can sit here and critique and say this and say that, and and also loud and praise because, look, you maybe didn't have your best, but you dominated a conference opponent, a Utah team that last year on a quarterback lower down the depth chart than they had, they lost to them, and it was on the road. So definitely had a chance to win that game too. It was an important win, and Coach Prime afterwards talked about how he's not exactly sure what the future holds for Kyle Whittingham, if that's the last time the Buffs end up matching up with Coach Whittingham as, conference opponents. We'll find out, but he's had a hell of a career, and certainly, look, this is a Colorado team who's just right there. And Coach Prime, was asked if he can reflect and if he has time to think. No, of course he doesn't. It is 1-0 mentality, and they've done an excellent job getting this team to lock in with an individual focus week by week by week, and I expect nothing less heading out to Kansas next week. And yet another really impressive performance and the dominant home win that I wanted to see them find a way to check off the box this year. They got it. 49-24 over Utah. Snaps the losing streak since 2016. All sorts of numbers are starting records, or you're starting to see it. Brian's got all the great stuff on his social media. Check it out there with all the numbers and statistics. And look, here's the situation. The Buffs are right there. They're this close to achieving what they felt like they could do and what a lot of people around the country said they couldn't. I had this team at a 6-7 win expectation before the year. Guess what? They've surpassed it. They're hot down the stretch. That's also what we talked about, them having the potential of being able to accomplish this year. You just got to stay hot, and you got to make sure that you don't take things for granted or don't go, oh well, we wanted to be able to execute that a little bit better. We'll be better next week. It's again, this is drilling time, detailed time, hypervigilance time. Nothing slips, and again, I think, knock on wood, by and large, they're pretty healthy overall. They've got some key injuries that hopefully they can get back. Hodge, Cokes, Horn, love to get all three of those guys back in the lineup, especially for next week. But we'll see, and just another step closer to an appearance in Jerry's world for the Big 12 title. Exciting times around the University of Colorado. It's finally getting cold as the sun went away. It was out all day. It was a stunning middle of November, Saturday in Boulder. Are you kidding me? Where else would you rather be? Matt Smith from Folsom.